every message about this anniversary right now in the media is politically coded in some way. It's either this is the worst thing that's ever happened because Trump's making it about himself, or Trump is the greatest president of all time and we need to stand behind him and be patriots. And so I'm really trying to present something of a middle view there, a more academically minded view. And I hope that I'm succeeding in showing people history as it happened rather than history with narrative messaging to it.
Hi folks, James here, and this is an Independence Day episode of the Spyro Circle, where I speak to Manny Marotta, who runs the X accounts for the History in Real Time projects. You may have seen the accounts. It's the 25 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 250 years ago. So it's the live history accounts that he runs. He's got a lot of attention this week specifically over the 250-year ago account, which of course is July 4, 1776, America's independence. So we speak a bit about that part of history. We speak a bit about today's reaction to that part of history in 2026, both from a political point of view and a media point of view. And we kind of just learn about his process and some of the things that he does to make sure that America's story is being told. So it's always a pleasure to catch up with him, and I hope you enjoy. Manny, pleasure to connect with you again.
Good to speak with you again, James.
Thank you. I wanted to touch base with you again. Last time we chatted, we spoke about how, like, kind of some of the things that you see running the accounts you run on X and the cultural nostalgia around some of the things that you evoke, or some of the things that the news that you post evokes. This time around, recently, we just saw America's 250th birthday on Independence Day through your 1776 account that garnered a lot of attention quite suddenly as the days led up to it. Can we kind of just take me back to kind of like what happened between last time you spoke and now? Like, what was the reaction you saw to that account specifically?
So the account was begun last year for the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution in April of 1775, which was the first battle of the Revolution, Lexington and Concord. But it was not getting so much traction or attention, mostly, I believe, because the people who lived 250 years ago are long dead. So it was also more of a drier and academic subject. There were not nearly as many exciting pieces of media, such as photographs or videos. So those didn't exist yet. So people weren't really into it that much. But recently, the traction was gained and about 300,000 followers and 20 million views because of some people who were on the right, who considered themselves Republicans in the United States, becoming interested in the account because of its patriotic content in a time when they feel, at least, that there's not enough patriotism within the United States. And so this account, they feel, and many on Twitter feel, is a way in which people can engage with the patriotism and the history of the United States without going out and doing it necessarily for a large budget or for to attract controversy, because oftentimes these kinds of public manifestations are attracting unwanted political discourse in the United States. And so a lot of people are praising the account right now for being an online way in which people can engage with this 250th anniversary. They can do it live. They can do it alongside the news that they already follow. And so this is what has gained several 100,000 followers and all the attention recently.
Yeah, it's amazing that people didn't kind of catch on to the fact that the account would be covering such a pivotal moment in American history up until seriously right a few days before, because I know that on the other account you have the 2001 live retelling of history. There's this kind of feeling of what's to come, kind of, and maybe that speaks to the different audiences that you just alluded to, and some maybe on the right versus the left, and maybe some of the things that evokes the reactions that some of the things I'm looking back on history does. But you mentioned just now that people on the right are seeking the content from that account as being like a patriotic view, when actually I don't think it's a patriotic view, it's just a kind of matter-of-fact historical view, right? So
Right.
So talk me through about that kind of the feeling there, like, because it is, last time we spoke, it's just you would say like, this is matter of fact. I'm just doing the news based on the resources available. But of course, it's a patriotic event. But we'll get into kind of the sentiments felt on the left and the right, and maybe why it's caused such a reaction. So, what can you tell me a bit about some of the response that you've been getting?
Well, so neutral or positive view of not just the American Revolution, but American history in general has become in recent years sort of right-wing coded. So if you are even reporting in an academic sense what happened, um, a lot of people do tend to see that as right wing. I am reporting the news in a matter of fact way. I am reporting based on the academic resources in our possession, and the materials that we have historically. Now, a lot of people are using AI content these days to try and make it more interesting. They're colorizing etchings and things like that. And I'm just using the documents and the photos. But I'm getting a very intense response from Americans who are just now remembering that it's the 250th anniversary, because I think that a lot of people were forgetting for most of the year. We're in this media cycle where the story of the week takes the dominant position every week. Uh, and people tend to forget historical anniversaries, except, as you mentioned, if it's something as emotionally pugnant as 9/11 is, where people still remember that within living memory. And it's an emotional subject. And so people tend to act on that and remember it for much longer, which is why on the 2001 account, people have been interested in that for like 18 to 24 months at this point. Whereas people didn't really notice on the 250 years ago account until a few days ago that it was going to be the 250th anniversary. And James, I think that speaks to the 250th as a whole in the United States. It's felt so subdued and quiet and not like an anniversary at all, nothing momentous. It's just felt like an obligatory liability that we have to get done. And that's a shame. I wish that people were more patriotic and that they loved their country regardless of who was president and what kind of politics he had, because history is something to love regardless of your political leanings. And it's important that you embrace the past, even if the current people who are in charge of embracing the past are not ones with whom you agree.
Mm. You know, it's true what they say that news is just history in real time. So we're kind of living in history every day, and all you, all you seem to be doing on the account is just kind of reliving that history. And we'll get into kind of the history of the future later on. But I do want to touch on what you said about maybe some of the feelings that people are having towards uh, the Independence Day this year. You know, it also speaks to the kind of the media ecosystem and the diet that everyone's on, because everything's becoming more fragmented, because you have the ecosystems of social media, but you also have kind of like other global events taking place. It wasn't even like the 250th anniversary of America this weekend. I mean, it was also the World Cup, for example, that's also taking place in the US. So there are all of these different events taking place all at the same time in different social media ecosystems. So that feeling of just maybe people not coming together or people not having this unifying experience it may not be kind of politically coded as well as it is just kind of social media fragmentation. What do you think about that?
Yes, you're right. There used to be something of a monoculture where everybody followed the same news. And we saw this in 1976 with the bicentennial, because that was such a cultural event whose effects reverberated for years because everybody was getting involved with the bicentennial. It was one of the few big news stories of that year. Aside, of course, there was an Olympic Games that year, similar to our World Cup. But yes, now we have so many different news cycles, so many different news sources that people are following. People are watching various networks, and they're following different websites and Twitter feeds, and it's just oversaturation. So yes, people are at this time following the World Cup and the Iran conflict and the reflecting pool and the ballroom and the MMA fights. And there's a fatigue about it where people just don't want to hear about politics or the news anymore because it's just too much, or they want to follow whatever niche that they're interested in and nothing more. So this monoculture in which everybody followed the same news has gone away. And in its place, there has become a fragmented culture, um, where the zeitgeist is not at all unified, not at all homogenous, and everybody is following different paths to reach different conclusions. Not necessarily a bad thing. Everybody is entitled to do what they wish, but it gives a sense of wistful nostalgia for maybe a time in which people were more unified by virtue of fewer distractions in the media, and less negativity in the media as well.
Fewer distractions, but also just fewer avenues in which to see that media, right? So now we have unlimited timelines and individual kind of phone devices. But 50 years ago, we had 4 TV stations that people would
Yes.
tune into. So it was a lot more of a monoculture. But I do want to just highlight some of the kind of media discussions that have been taking place. And there is a bit of a one-sided, there is a kind of discussion over the outlets that are presenting in one way versus presenting another way when it comes to something like this. And I don't want to get into the ugliness of the kind of political sides behind it, but I just wanted to highlight some things. CNN described the mood as the nation's big birthday party is shaping up to be a big blah. I know that the New York Times ran an op-ed yesterday saying that the kind of president was ruining the Independence Day, and they've changed the headline after backlash. Um, Another one, Washington Post, ran an opinion piece saying that the this occasion has become an unfortunate metaphor on national divisions. So a lot of the media is kind of being a bit negative about it. But then, of course, you have the other side of things, like Disney running wall-to-wall coverage. You have the free press running amazing content over some of the stories and histories of the country. So you do have conflicting messaging in real time, even if everyone can see it. What do you think about some of the messages from each institution?
While I would agree that the media is being divisive and trying to say that the anniversary will be a big blah, as you mentioned, I think that also the administration is partially responsible for that as well, because I visited Washington, D.C. not too long ago, and the only America 250 content that I saw were giant banners with Donald Trump's face on them, and then maybe some flags, maybe some bunting, but nothing about the anniversary itself, more about the person who happens to be president at the time of the anniversary. Of course, he's just asked that we put his name on money now. He's doing all sorts of photo shoots with him at Mount Rushmore or with his ballroom or with whatever project he's doing right now. And so, yes, while the media is driving a lot of this divisiveness and feeding into sort of the, one would call it rage bait that Trump is putting forward, um, he's not doing the best job at commemorating this anniversary either. And that's exactly why I think it's important to do a commemoration not based on a person, not based on a political idea, but upon academic resources that we possess at any given time. And that's what I hope to accomplish with this 250 years ago live account, is to present academically sourced stories without any sort of political bias or messaging attached to them, um, simply to create maybe a simulation of the monoculture that we had in the past once again. Because I think that every message about this anniversary right now in the media is politically coded in some way. It's either this is the worst thing that's ever happened because Trump's making it about himself, or Trump is the greatest president of all time and we need to stand behind him and be patriots. Um, and so I'm really trying to present something of a middle view there, a more academically minded view. And I hope that I'm succeeding in showing people history as it happened rather than history um, with narrative messaging to it.
And so talk us through your process in finding some of that history that you choose to share. I mean, I don't want to. You must do a fair amount of editorializing in the sense that you choose what you post. But in terms of sourcing the materials, in terms of the information that you have access to, talk us through the process that you have finding for 1776 versus, let's say, 2001, which is obviously a bit more accessible and probably has its own set of challenges. But talk us through how you sourced the information for the last weekend.
So you mentioned 2001 there. Yes, you're right. With every other one of the accounts, there's excessive photographic and video coverage available on the internet. And so you're able to find information about these and almost anywhere. With 1776, it's a lot more of a challenge because not only was there not excellent record keeping, many of those records have been lost and many of those records have not been digitized either. So it's been a little bit of a challenge. But since pretty much the centennial in 1876. The Library of Congress has been doing an excellent job at compiling and arranging and storing the records that were available from 1776. And so in recent years, they've begun digitizing them all. So the Library of Congress's website, apolitically, because they've been doing this under various presidents of different parties, has been compiling and digitizing records from 1776. And this is primarily where I get my information. Furthermore, it's a common misconception that records were bad in 1776. They were actually great. The founding fathers kept minutes of their meetings leading up to the revolution, or leading up to the Declaration of Independence. And so we have those minutes. We have letters that they sent to one another and drafts of documents. I just posted Thomas Jefferson's draft of the Declaration. Essentially, what they consider to be waste, the things that they threw in the rubbish bin, we have these now, these papers. And they've been digitized, and you can read them, and you can gain a little bit of insight into what they were thinking and what they were doing. And so when you say that I might be editorializing it in a way, it's more about choosing which content from those letters and from those draft documents to publish, because obviously not all of that content made it into the Declaration or the Constitution.
Right.
But a
Yeah,
lot,
I don't mean. Yeah, I don't mean. I should probably be more precise with my language. I didn't mean that you are editorializing. I meant that you have a selection process, right? You can't publish everything, so you have to
curation, I
choose
think, would be,
which bit goes out and when and
yes.
how.
Yes, and that's based upon reading the letters that they wrote to one another or the documents that they drafted, and then choosing which of those are most relevant to future battles and documents and treaties that would be released. But essentially, I get all my information from the Library of Congress archives because it's excellently digitized and anybody can access it. It's public and it's free and it's got a great search engine too. So loc.gov if you too want to view all these documents in the raw state.
Yeah, that'd be cool. And then maybe in the future we could have like conflicting historical accounts, right? Because there'll be so much to resource. Um, that would be that'd be bizarre, actually.
Well,
Um,
it was very politicized at the time too. You know, it was actually more violently politicized back then because people would be out beating each other physically and tar and feathering one another over political disagreements in the past. At least we don't do that today, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, that's true. At least we can all hide behind our screens now, and we can call each other words from the safety of our living rooms without being tarred and feathered, as you said. So, talk to us a bit about Manny and who he is. That he gets to a point where he's running all of these different accounts, highlighting all these different parts of history. Like, what leads someone to do something like that?
So in January of 2018, I was sitting in a history class at the University of Pittsburgh, where I went to college, and I was bored. And I was thinking to myself, there really has to be a more engaging way to teach history and to talk about it than to make students memorize a series of names and dates and then give them an examination on that on Scantron, the multiple choice bubbles. Um, and Twitter at the time was maybe at the peak of its popularity in 2018. And I was thinking, well, everybody's getting their news from this anyway, and there are all these accounts that say things like breaking news, here's what's happening today. What if one were to do that for history? And people could follow along in history in real time, parallel to the timeline in which they currently live. And so in 2018 was the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War. And so I decided to start 100 Years Ago Live to cover the final year of the First World War. Um, and I did that, and it gained quite a bit of popularity among both academic communities and people who thought, oh, this is cool. I get to learn about history in a way where a teacher is not lecturing to me and forcing me to memorize names and dates. So the following year for the Apollo 11 moon landing, I began 50 years ago live. And then 2 years after that, for the death of Princess Diana, I began 25 years ago live. Um, and then in the spring of last year was when the 250th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first battles of the Revolution, occurred. And so I began 250 years ago live because I thought that I wanted to follow the revolution. And we learn about it in the US through programs such as Schoolhouse Rock, which is a very simplified program for children that presents the revolution in a cartoon format. There's a show called Liberty's Kids that does the same thing. And we learned about it in our third, fourth grade classrooms alongside learning the first Thanksgiving was just the colonists and the Indians harmoniously coming together. So obviously there needs to be a more in-depth way in which people can engage with the revolution than just learning about it as little children. And so I started this account in an effort to do that, and I've gained a lot of positive feedback in terms of, wow, I didn't know this battle occurred. I didn't know this general had a role early on. And the biggest thing, I didn't know the founding fathers were so young. Most of the people who signed the Declaration and later the Constitution were in their 20s and early 30s. And they were very engaged with national politics and overthrowing a colonial empire at an age in which most of us are in university. And so this was inspiring to see. And I wanted to tell people about their stories because it shows us that humanity is capable of more than we think we are. So I'm glad that people are engaging with the 250 years ago live content because it does present to them a more detailed view into the revolution than one that they received when they were young, and then any that they're receiving from the media today. And so I hope that people are become genuinely interested in the revolution and preserving our history, because unlike in Europe, where they have centuries and centuries of history beneath their feet, the United States has two major wars on its soil: the Revolution and the Civil War. Um, and we really need to care about preserving this history because it's our history. It's not like um, the First or Second World War, which is more Europe's history. This is ours. This is our thing. And so, if to preserve American heritage and identity, we need to care about the revolution. And so, my hope is to get people interested in that.
Mm. Well, it definitely seems like people are caring and responding, and the reaction there has been strong, at least from what I've been seeing online for the last couple of days. It's been interesting to note that when we talk, it's been, there have been moments, pivotal moments of history that have taken place, let's say 25 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, 250, as your accounts outline. There's a lot of times where there are years in those windows where a lot happens. So in parallel, you've got this 2001 account and 1776 account with major events. How often does history kind of align generationally, or are there eras where things happen and where things don't happen? They say there are times where there are weeks where years happen and years where weeks happen. What do you see in terms of the pictures that you're building, and how history kind of shows itself?
Something that has reassured me about running these accounts is that humans have sort of always been the same and they've reacted in the same way. I believe we may have discussed this last time,
Mm.
but there's a theory in history in the academic community that there are cyclical motions to humanity and to society, in that there are cycles, whether they be 50 years, 100 years, or 200 years or more, in which there's periods of revolution, or there's periods of war, or lavish luxury, or poverty and hard times. Voltaire once said that history is the story of silk slippers dashing downstairs and rugged boots clomping up. And the stairwell is more of an escalator. It's continuously moving. And so, yes, you see a parallel between the 1770s and 2001. I would even say that there's a lot of parallel between the 1920s and 1770s, because soon we're going to be moving into the 30s. And both of these periods were very difficult times for the United States, in which we asked ourselves, who are we? What are we doing? And what do we want? Um, and it's often overlooked. In a neat story that's wrapped up for children, we declared independence and then it was over and then we were a country. But in reality, there were battles, there were famines, there was a big currency crisis. We were divided as a country until the Civil War, essentially, for 100 years. And there were periods later on of that division, in particular the Great Depression, the 70s, which was the height of crime in the United States, and then the 2000s, where we were trying to find our identity and who we were after the September 11th attacks. Um, and so all of these align with the 1770s because the Revolutionary War was a pivotal moment of declaring who we were. And in these other eras, we're finding aspects of our identity that we did not know that we needed to locate in the future. And so they will continue to keep tying back to the Revolutionary War in every respect.
And so you're going to end this year. I'm going to break the fourth wall and say end this year, 2026, the year that we are speaking in today. You're going to end this year, and history is going to go on, and things will continue, and things will need to be reported. What's your end game in this? How far do you see your coverage and your reporting in these accounts to go?
So originally, when I started this, as mentioned, it was meant to be a First World War live Twitter account. It was meant to end on November 11th, 2018, but it gained such a popular reception, and I was so interested in doing it every day that I decided to just run it forever. And now we're in a position where I'm running 150, 25, and 250 years ago indefinitely. Every morning, I'm waking up and putting together these stories, and then I'm reporting on them, and then I'm going to bed at night and then doing it again the next day. And I plan to do that every single day of my life until I'm either incapacitated or die. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's just my primary hobby. It's the thing that I like to do the very most, and it is what I intend to do for the rest of my life.
And do you intend to keep doing that on X, or do you see other platforms, other ways of presenting this information?
So I've made an attempt to branch out to Instagram. I do have the Life History Project on Instagram, but no matter how often that I plug it or try and tell people that it exists, it doesn't really ever seem to gain much popularity. Um, and I've tried Facebook as well, and that gained pretty much no popularity. So I am thinking that it's going to stay on X at this time until I can figure something out. Now, many people have appealed for me to begin a YouTube channel and start making videos. However, the resources required to edit such videos are vast. It takes 2 hours to even edit a 5-minute video, and I simply don't have that time. So unless I gain an editing team of some kind, then I will not branch out to YouTube. But if I do, that would be very nice because I prefer the video format anyway. So my hope is that within the next decade, I begin producing videos about history where I dress up in a Revolutionary War costume and pretend that I'm there reporting on it. Or I do the same in the 1920s or the 1970s or the 2000s.
That'd be cool. You could carry all the costumes and all the hairstyles and
Yeah.
all the fads, right? We could
Yes.
do it all in different times. Um, that's great. So going ahead, I wanted to kind of just get to the kind of close of this for now that we have, but I want to kind of speak about the future in kind of how your attempt to, or your intention to continue covering these instances of history in real time as they occur. Um, this time we gathered in the context in that it was a bit more fragmented than it has been in the past because there have been multiple attempts to kind of shout over or frame the culture and the attention deficit that we seem to struggle with. Do you see that problem getting better or worse over time? I mean, hypothetically, if we were to meet again for America's 300th birthday, assuming you're still doing this and we're still connecting like this, would it be more politically polarized? Would it be more fragmented? Like, how does it come back together?
I'm actually pretty optimistic about this. I think that right now we're at sort of max, well, we're not at all even at max political polarization. There have been eras in the past, as I discussed, where people have resorted to violence. There was a whole civil war over it. But I don't see ourselves ever getting to that point. We're not going to go into the streets and be violent with one another. And I think that this discourse on the internet is as intense as it's going to get for the next century or so. I do believe that this problem can all be traced back perhaps to one source. And once that source is no longer present, then I think that most of the problems are going to go away. And that's my optimistic and honest view on the situation. I do think that we're going to come together again as a nation once we have more moderate politics guiding us in the future.
And you think I think that's I think it's optimistic the uh, to put the coming together of a nation um, on the shoulders of one person and the person, whether or not they're there or not. I think the problems are a bit more institutional than that. So you think, just to clarify, you think that once kind of politics changes as it always does. You think everything's going to come together. I think there's a lot more. I'm going to push back slightly on what you've said because I think there's more of an institutional reformation that needs to take place. Um, but that's probably where you and I differ. Um,
Well, a secondary thought that I had on this was I do think that in periods of history, having studied it intensely, national cataclysm tends to bring people together. And so, from a more pessimistic viewpoint, if there were to be another event, God forbid, of 9/11 or a Second World War style event, I think that would do a great job at bringing people together. But I do hope such an event does not occur because of the tragedy of it. However, people are going to come back together in either one or two ways. Decades of civic recovery following this particularly toxic era of social media and media politicization that we have right now, or one national cataclysm. One of the two, in my view, is going to happen.
well, let's hope it's the former then.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Manny, any parting words of wisdom, maybe anything that you've learned over the last couple of maybe days during this period about the reactions you've seen by people, or any parting message that you want to leave to anyone who may be watching or listening to this in such an exciting point of multiple histories?
Yes. If you want to learn from history, don't listen to the words of media pundits who are reporting history secondhand. Please read the words of the people in history and the primary sources firsthand. They convey their message more than anybody else does. And don't even listen to me as a Twitter account that reports their history. Please go and read their words and interpret them in whatever way that you see fit, because that is the best way to learn from history, is from the mouths of the people who actually spoke it and wrote it.
Well, yeah, from the horse's mouth directly, right? That's the whole thing. Hear from the horse's mouth. Manny, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time that you put into presenting the history in multiple kind of timelines and multiple eras. And as you kind of were saying, to kind of maintain that level of just object fact, which tends to be disappearing nowadays. And I look forward to seeing how it all goes and seeing how America develops in its early days from the
Yeah.
1776 account.
Well, it did take quite a long time. The revolution continued until 1783, and then we didn't have our constitution until 1787. And I also apologize to you as a British person for what we did, breaking away from you like that. But yes, I'm glad that the United States and Britain are friends again. I'm glad that we're mutually interested in following the events of the revolution and learning from it together.
It's all right. I often say as a British person that our gift to the world is giving all the other countries their Independence
Independence
Days.
days. Yeah,
So
that is
you
true.
are welcome for that. And yeah, it's been a pleasure, Manny. I always enjoy talking to you, and I look forward to hearing how it goes and reconnecting again in the future or later in the past.
We will see what happens around September 11th and how the collective memory of Americans is in 2026 about it, and what we feel that we can learn about it today.
All right, wonderful. That's great. That's really helpful. Manny, thank you so much again for everything that you do and the stories you share with the hundreds of thousands of people that tune in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James, and I look forward to speaking with you once again.
Cheers.